Well, welcome back. This is going to be the beginning of the 7th grade drawing project. So 7th grade drawing project part 1, I suppose is what we'll be calling this. The first day of this is usually goes pretty slow as the students are just trying to learn the whole concept that I'm trying to get across to you, which is going to be perspective. We covered that in our notes. And so for this project you're going to need a piece of paper, and I have one here bordered by black marker, but you'll need just a regular piece of drawing paper or poster board. It works best if it's white. It can't be shiny. It has to be textured like regular paper, so that later on when we finish this out you'll see the reason for that. But it does need to be 12 inches, that'd be tall this way, by 18 inches wide. And that seems to make an appropriate size drawing for us. So 12 by 18, which is the standard size we use in pretty much artwork in the art classroom, in the physical classroom at school. So you'll need a 12 by 18 inch piece of paper. It would be very helpful if you had an 18-inch ruler, or even just a piece of a yardstick that's 18 inches long would be very helpful. If you can't find that, then a typical 12-inch ruler, turn this right side up, will work. It's just, for me, that's shiny and it gets in the way of what I'm trying to do, so I probably will not use that. But if you have a ruler similar to this, that also will work as well. I like to use, when I'm working on my own, a clear ruler, although in this case the clear ruler might be a little bit shiny. So I might experiment back and forth with all of these various materials, and that's probably what we're going to try to do here. So you need to have a ruler. You're going to probably need an eraser of some sort. Of course, a pencil is always a good thing to have as well. Other than that, you know, you're really going to be ready to draw. We are going to spend days drawing this, and we're going to draw a picture of a city using one-point perspective. One-point perspective is merely the idea that as things get farther from you, they appear to get smaller. So we're probably going to draw like 4 buildings on one side of the street, 4 buildings on the other side of the street. So even an 18-inch ruler, as you can see, is not long enough to span the distance from the corner to the corner unless you were really good at accurately aiming it. I'm going to say let's just measure this off, and then we can find the center of it without having to fight too much. So if we know that the paper is 18 inches long, that means at 9 inches we can make a mark about right here. Okay, so I put a little registration mark right there that I will erase here momentarily. And if the paper is 12 inches tall, we can pretty accurately estimate by placing the 6 on the edge of the paper. And if it's straight up and down, parallel to the sides of the paper, on that corner right there, that should be pretty much the dead center of the paper as far as I can tell. On a 12 by 18 inch piece of paper, that should be pretty much the middle of it. Now if you have a yardstick, that would work better, because you could actually lay a yardstick across the entire paper and then just go from corner to corner and draw your marking, and you would be fine that way. However, this will be fine as long as it is 9 inches over here. I'll mark that at the bottom. Okay, and then 6 inches straight up to here, and that'd be 6 up to here. Okay, now I'm going to erase all that because we're going to get drawing now. So, whether you have a 18-inch ruler or a 10-inch ruler or a 12-inch ruler isn't going to really make much of a difference at this point. And so all we have to be able to do is get from the center, that dot, which is called a vanishing point. So let's mark that as a VP. I'll reference that constantly. The vanishing point is that dot in the dead middle of the picture. So as long as your ruler, one corner can stretch all the way to the next corner over here, then you'll be good to go. Let me see if I can do that with my 10-inch ruler, which I prefer to use. Not quite, but it's pretty close. I might be able to estimate that. Let's see how my clear ruler lines up on this one. So I put that at the 0. That looks pretty good actually right there. So I may use several of these different rulers to make my markings with. But for this one, I'm going to simply start setting up my paper. So all I really need to do is go from the dot that I put in the middle and angle it toward the corner. And then we're going to make a mark. I'm going to mark a little darker than you should. You should draw lightly. Lots of this needs to be erased later. So if you draw really heavy-handed, you'll struggle to erase it. We'll do the same thing from the dot to the upper left corner. Now I'm drawing a little bit more darkly pronounced than you should, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Also, I've got pretty good erasers that probably would scrub a hole right in this paper if I weren't careful. Now we're going to do the same thing again. I like you all to get into the habit of drawing on the top of the ruler, so I'm going to model that. So we're going to put this on the dot, rotate it down until it's pointing directly at the corner. You've got to hold that ruler down firmly so it does not skid when you are making your marks. And then lastly, we'll go to the upper right corner. So get into the habit of drawing on the top of the ruler. And you will have to watch carefully as I draw, because you really need to duplicate the maneuvers that I'm making. So if that means you got to slow the video down, then that's fine. Do that if you have to. I can draw pretty fast, but I'm going to try to go at a pace that is appropriate for the students in this classroom. So here's what we're going to do. If you can use your imagination, this is one side of the street. These are buildings on one side of the street. These are buildings on the other side of the street. This is the street itself, and this is basically the sky, and there will be background and stuff in there. So we're going to get going here on making our first buildings. And so in your case, I'm going to use my white ruler for this, so that the markings or the measurements are clearly from the edge of the ruler, from the 0. Okay, so I think I'm right-handed, so I like to work from the left to the right rather than dragging my arm through everything. However, you should have somewhere near you an index card or a piece of paper or something that you can put under your hand when you draw. Your hand gets really dirty on the back. That gets all over your drawings, and it interferes with your ability to add color to them later. Plus, it smears it all up, and it just looks, you know, unprofessional. So I'm going to be using, I think, the centimeter scale on my ruler. So if you've got a ruler like this, you'd simply have to flip it upside down so you can see the centimeter scale. I might even go to this ruler because it may have a better visual centimeter scale, and it's on the top of the ruler, in fact, right side up. So I am going to go to this ruler, although it is shiny. I think it will work better for what I am attempting to do for you all. Okay, we're going to place the 0 of that ruler on the left edge of the paper, angle it straight at the center of all this, and we're going to measure off about, let's just say, let's make it 5 centimeters. So we're going to put a little registration dot right there above the 5. Now I'm going to use terms like vertical, horizontal, diagonal a lot, and what that really means is that a vertical line is one that is straight up and down. A horizontal line is one which is straight sidewards. A diagonal line is tilted. There's several different types of markings we're going to make. So now whenever we do a vertical line, it needs to be parallel to this edge of the paper, or your buildings will get all tilty. So I'm going to lay my ruler on my registration dot. I'm going to orient it so it's perfectly vertical, straight up and down, parallel to the edge of the paper. And when I've got that, I'm going to hold it down firmly, and I'm going to strike a mark that falls in between the 2 tilted lines. Now I'm going to bold this line because you need to see it while I work. You should draw it lightly in case you need to do any erasing. Now I'm going to go back to the street level, and I'm going to bold that line also. So I will work to make this visible to you. You can always darken your lines later. However, if you get them too dark now and you need to erase things, you will struggle with that. Okay, so what we really have created now is the first building on the left side of the street. So this building is going to have windows and doors in it, of course. It wouldn't be much of a building without them. So first thing we want to do is put in a door. It's really quite simple. We're going to take the top right corner of the ruler and we're going to place it on the vanishing point. And then we're going to rotate it downwards. Well, first of all, we probably want to make a measurement on how tall our door is going to be, and we're going to do that from the middle. So we make a little registration mark right here, and then we place the ruler. Let's call this, let's go with 6 centimeters from that dot. So 6 centimeters, we're going to put another registration dot right there that we're going to use. Okay, so that's 6 centimeters. I'm going to write that on there. And the width of our building was 5 centimeters. So I'm going to write that on there. Now all of this will be erased later. Okay, so this is 6 centimeters tall, and that's just the door. Okay, so now we'll go back here again. We'll put the top right corner of the ruler on the vanishing point. We'll find our dot peeking out just above the ruler, and then we're going to make a line that has some space on each side of it representing the sides of the doors. So I'm going to show you how it rests on the vanishing point. It tilts directly downhill, and it should be something similar to what you see there. There needs to be a space on each side of the door, approximately a centimeter, I suppose, if you needed to know that. Now, there's architectural terms we'll be talking about during this exercise and the project, and it will help you understand more accurately what people are discussing when they are talking about architecture. And in this case, the top of a door is called its lintel. Now, so we've already drawn the lintel, the top of the door in. We're going to now take our ruler and turn it sideways like this, okay, vertical. And this line here should be parallel to the side of the paper, the sides of the doors, the jambs, the side of a door is called a jamb, should be also vertical. So we're going to line it up carefully, and then we're going to find the little bit of the door peeking out from behind it, strike in a line. So that is the right jamb as we look at it. So we've got and the bottom of the door is called the threshold. So it's the threshold, the jamb, and the lintel. Now we'll just have to do this again, but this time we're going to have to work backhanded, meaning we've got to hold the ruler like this so we can see a little bit of it peeking out from behind the door there. Hold it down firmly, and then, this is tricky, you got to work backhanded on the other side of the ruler sometimes. And that helps you to make the line better, more parallel to this side line there that indicates the edge of our drawing. Okay, now, sometimes it seems like it takes forever just to get that first door in. If we were in the physical classroom, this would have taken us most of the period just to get this far. But we're in a virtual classroom right now, and so it's not quite so complicated. It doesn't look so complicated. Now we're going to make a series of windows next, and we're going to put 4 windows in this building. So we're going to put a little registration mark at the top and about halfway across. Put your dot right there. And perspective is an interesting three-dimensional illusion, because at first it's hard for you all to understand that these windows and doors are tilted, but the tops and bottoms of all windows and doors, at least in this setup, will slant toward the vanishing point, and you'll see that soon. So let's put the 0 of our ruler right on the dot, the registration dot we placed at the top right here, okay, about halfway across the building. And then we're going to measure down by, let's measure down, for instance, first of all, we're going to put dots here, a series of dots. We're going to put a dot at the 1, then we're going to put a dot at the 3, then we're going to put a dot at the 5 centimeters, then we're going to put a dot at the 7, and then we're going to put a dot at the 9, and so this would be 1, 2, wait a minute, that'd be 1, that's a space, 2, space, okay, a dot at the 11, so it goes space, window, space, window 2, space, window 3, space, okay, we'll put another one at 13, and then we'll put another one at 15. That'll work out. So each one of these dots represents a window that we're going to put in here. So it goes like this. There'll be a space above this window, and this will be window number 1. And then there'll be a space, and then this will be window number 2. And then there'll be a space, and this will be window number 3. And then there'll be a space again, and this will be window number 4. I'm going to erase this portion right now because this note of 5 centimeters I find to be distracting. So, and I think it's distracting to the students as well. So we should have a series of dots, as you can see, straight down the middle. Now this is where it gets tricky. Each time we draw a line for our window, we have to check the corner of the ruler. It has to be right on that vanishing point, and it rotates upwards and downwards like this, almost as if we had drilled a hole in the corner of this ruler and put a thumbtack in it, and it would rotate like this. So the tops and bottoms of all of the doors and windows will slant toward this. So we're going to make sure it's on the corner of the ruler. We're going to find our first dot, and we're going to draw a line that has got about a 1 centimeter width of space on either side of it. And you can check it. So we want these lines to all, the edges, the sides of them, all to line up one with the other if we can make that happen. So I'm going to estimate down to here, and I'm going to draw another line visually, making sure it's close, about straight up and down from that one. Okay? Then we're going to do this again. We have 4 windows and a space in between each window, so that means we have to draw 8 lines. So we're going to come down here again. Check to make sure this is on the vanishing point. If you don't, you will have scrambled up windows. And it's really, really obvious to somebody that knows what they're looking at. I can tell in the virtual classroom, I really can't tell so much as when we're in a physical classroom, and then I can clearly walk around and see what you're doing and make corrections right there on the spot. Okay, so that's our third line. Check the vanishing point. We're going to rotate down to our next little registration dot. We're going to hold our ruler down. Then we're going to draw another line. And our goal here is to have the sides of these lines all, line up with each other. And you'll see why here momentarily. So look, we've got a space, a window, a space, a window. Now we've got another space. So we rotate down to our next dot. So we do a lot of registration dots because it helps us space things out so that they look more natural, instead of having like a window with a huge gap in between it and then another window with nothing. All of that looks really crazy. So we want to space them out so it looks intentional. So once again, always the corner of the ruler touching the vanishing point. And we find our next dot, right there above the 10 in this case, and we're trying to line the edges of our windows up one above the other, so that if we had to, we could close them up with one continuous line. Okay. Now, we've got our space again, but that was window number 3, and we're going to hold the corner of the ruler. It has to stay right on that vanishing point whenever we're drawing the tops and bottoms of doors or windows. Alright, now this one should be almost perfectly horizontal, meaning straight sideways. This line, that is. And then lastly, we're going to go down to the last dot here, registration dot. This one is below horizontal a little bit. Make sure it's on that vanishing point. Find your registration dot, and we want to make this one about as wide as the previous one if we can line them up that way. It makes them much more believable that way. Alright, so what we have succeeded in doing now is setting up our windows. So it should go small space above the window, window 1 space, window 2 space, window 3 space, and window 4. Now if you've made it this far and you're keeping up with the instruction, 2 things must be happening. You must be pretty skilled at this, and secondly, I must be a genius for a teacher. But maybe both of those are true, or maybe neither of those is true. But it normally takes quite some time in order to get through the very first portion of this. And as time goes by, we will get faster and faster at it. So, now we've got to set up our sides of our windows. So in this case, I'm going to, hopefully, I just want to set my ruler so that it's perfectly straight up and down, and I can see a little bit of the windows peeking out from behind it, but it's got to be straight up and down. I'd rather erase some things off than have to tilt it. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to close up this window, and I'm going to lift up. Close up the window, lift up. Close up the window, lift up one more time. And then when I pull my ruler away, and it was straight up and down as I showed you, I've got some places that are slung out a little bit too far, so I can carefully erase those off. Nothing, no harm done. And then I can also dust that, I like to have a little duster brush that keeps me from touching the drawing too much. It gets very smudged up if you do that. So now our windows, are lined up one above the other. That looks very attractive. It looks like an actual building that somebody planned. We're going to do a similar operation but in reverse. So we take our ruler and we're going to perfectly straight up and down, if we can make it go that way, vertical. You got to make it vertical. Okay. And we may have to work backhanded in this case. That means holding it down with your non-dominant hand and your drawing hand on the other side. I think I can scoot this out a little bit more. Looks like it to me. Okay. I can still see my registration mark. So we're going to go line, lift up, line, lift up, line, lift up, and then the last window, lift up again. So we should have 4 windows and a door on the front of our first building. Now, that's really not too bad, because it seems like it's only taken about, I guess, a little over 20 minutes to get that far. And that's not bad in a class that is usually about 45 minutes long. And any of these that are slung out too far, I just carefully erase them off, get my duster out, my duster brush, and carefully remove it. Okay, so I'm going to keep the 6 centimeter marking in there to remind us when we do another building across the street how big that really needs to be. Okay, and so let's, if you've got any erasing to do, like get some of these little dots out of there, because they will show up in your work later on. And then just some touch-up work. This is the time to do it. So some of these little dots, they mess with me a little bit, so I like to have it all kind of cleaned up as I go along. So when I get to the next phase of the drawing, I don't have to go back and do a lot of this. Now, instructionally, I will leave notes on my drawings simply so they can help your understanding of what we're doing. Alright, now, in this case, I got a little bit too aggressive. I've got to touch that line back in there. Okay, so you should have something similar to this. And if it looks even remotely similar to this, then you have been doing it right. Now, in our exercise during our drawing notes, we did a little bit less complicated version of this. We simply just drew squares or blocky images on the side. We didn't really go into all of the details on what it is. So now we're going to measure off again, and we want to be able to get several buildings between us where we're at right now. We appear to be standing in the middle of the street looking way off down the street. So we're going to try to put in maybe 4 buildings on each side of the street if we can make that happen. So let's take out our ruler again, and we're going to lay it right here against even up with the vanishing point straight sidewards, and we're going to measure off some distance here. And I'm going to say probably the distance to measure off in this case should be about 2 centimeters. So let's put a dot right above the 2 there. Make sure you're measuring from the 0. Now that dot, we'll put in here, that's 2 centimeters away from the previous building. Now I will, of course, erase that later. Now here's where we got to maybe work backhanded again. Sometimes your ruler, if it's opaque, meaning that you can't see through it, what happens is it covers up work you've just made and you can't see very well. So if you've got that situation, you may have to work backhanded, or you could turn your drawing upside down, but that can get confusing, okay? So if you've got an opaque ruler, you may have to work on this side of it. I am working with a transparent ruler, so because of that I can see the line that I'm trying to duplicate. But I'm going to switch over to what you all have to use in order to show you how this is done. So if you have a ruler such as this, we're simply going to hold it down, we're going to find that mark. It's going to be precisely 2 centimeters from the previous building, perfectly vertical. That means parallel with the side of the paper, straight up and down. We don't want our town to look like it was, designed by and built by the Three Stooges Construction Company. Now we're going to work backhanded. You need to hold this ruler down firmly in this case. So I'm going to start my line. I may have to move my hands. Ooh, I don't like to have to move. Okay, here we try this again. I'm going to hold this down firmly. And I don't even have it straight anymore. There we go. Okay, very good. Okay, let's see what we got. So this is an alleyway. That's what this represents. So now that I got that line right there, I can go back and bold this a little bit. And that's a pretty good start right there. Now, in our exercise, you may recall that between each building or each object in our drawing exercise, we had a space in between those. So in this case, we're going to use our ruler. It's going to be straight sideways. Where it meets this tilted line, it's got to be horizontal. So we put it right on that corner, and we're going to draw it backwards until it disappears behind the first building. And then we erase this portion. So it looks like there is a passageway between those two buildings. Okay, now if you got your little duster brush, dust it off. We have to do the same thing, but that will take place up here where these two lines meet. So we simply lay our ruler on that line. It must be straight sideways, horizontal. Find our mark and carefully scribe a line that disappears when it passes behind the first building on the left side. And remove the ruler. Now we can erase this portion off, and as you can see, we're beginning to have the appearance of the next building show up. So this is really once you learn how it is done, it is really quite simple. If you do not know how it's done, it is quite complicated. And so I'm simply making this particular city up as I go along right now, but typically we have 4 buildings on each side of the street. So this next building is going to have a roof on it. This building is flat roofed, as you can tell, but the next building is going to have what's called a typical gable roof on it. So our first order business is probably going to be to measure off some distance here. Now the light on my camera makes it difficult for you to see sometimes. So I'm going to probably use the bottom. I'm going to lay this up so you can see how I'm working here. So you can see my measurements with this ruler much more easily. It's not shiny. So in this case, I think what we will do is we will measure off 4 centimeters this time and put a dot right there. So 4 centimeters from the corner of this building. I'm going to write that in there, but it will be erased later. Just like this right here is getting erased. Okay, now as things get farther away from us in a perspective drawing, they appear to get smaller. So this building may actually be the same size in reality as this building. However, because it's getting farther from us, it appears to be getting smaller. So let's take that ruler. I may have to work on I'll work with the red ruler like you all have to do. So if that's the case, you will be able to compare the back of the ruler to this, because this ruler is not quite 4 centimeters wide. So we'll find our little registration dot 4 centimeters away, 4 centimeters away, and it's going to be straight up and down, perfectly vertical, and then we're going to strike a line that passes through our registration dot. Okay, now that's not too bad. So we have the first building, 4 windows and a door. We have the second building beginning to form, and that makes for a pretty good start on this. So let's continue on. Now I know I may be going pretty fast, and I'm going to try to be merciful in the pace of my production. In a regular physical classroom, it would take almost an entire period to get just what we have done here right now in a matter of about 30 minutes. So I do need to slow the pace of the instruction down, because I know many of you will be struggling to keep up with me during this. So we're going to start setting up our roof next. In order to make the roof, we're going to estimate from this corner to this portion over here. We're going to estimate about halfway. I'm going to put a little dot above the line in this case, about halfway. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be about half this distance. And then we will take I'm going to take my ruler here, and I'm going to measure off. I'm going to try to find one that will work for us that is not all reflecty. Okay, up here in this portion of the drawing, it's not that reflective. So we're going to measure off, in this case, let's say let's say 4 centimeters. That seems to be about right. And we'll just put the 4 on the dot, and we'll lightly draw a line up to where the 0 would be if there's a 0 on your ruler. So in that case, we should have like a little antenna that's sticking out the top of our building, and it should be 4 centimeters from our registration dot. So this is 4 centimeters wide, this is 4 centimeters tall. Now we're going to erase this. We have to keep the drawing clean in order to not make it ununderstandable. So about 4 centimeters up here. Now we're going to take our ruler again, and in this case I'm going to switch over to the white ruler. And most of the time students like to put a dot at the top of this for some reason, and if that helps you, then go ahead. And I'm going to put a dot there because it's just what I see the students do most frequently. Now we're going to draw a line carefully from the dot to the front corner of this building. And so it's important that you orient it properly. We're looking for this corner of the building right here and the dot on the top of our antenna. Okay, now technically this is a layout line. That's what it's called. But I call it an antenna because it's relatable to my students. Okay, we draw that line and we notice that we've got a diagonal line coming down here, which is foreshortened. Now if I just told you to draw a triangle on the top of the building, it would not be properly foreshortened. That means it wouldn't be turned in space properly so that it was visible to us appropriately. We're going to do the same thing again, but this time we're going to follow our line, and right here is where we're going to orient ourselves toward the top of the layout line, or the antenna. But it's not really an antenna because we're going to erase it. So from the corner to the top of the layout line, hold the ruler down firmly, make your mark, and then we're going to slide it away so you can see what it should look like in this case. I'm going to remove some of my implements here, which are a distraction, I'm sure. So we have a typical gable roof. That means it's got like a triangular end to it. So let's carefully erase away our layout work. The first day usually goes pretty slow, and a project will last approximately 11 days, maybe 12 sometimes, and this is only the very first day of this project. And if you're keeping up with the instruction, then you're making tremendous progress. Now we're probably just going to have to make one more marking, and then that will be probably plenty for one session. Okay, we're going to operate on the bottom of the ruler this time. We're going to find the peak of our roof right here, and we're going to go straight sidewards. We need to look at the bottom of the paper. If you work on the top of the ruler, you can do this backhanded. You can find the peak of the roof sticking out from behind it, and you can compare that then to the top of the paper, and that will help you get a horizontal line as well. So, but I like to be able to see what I'm drawing. And so in this case, I hate to obscure any part of the drawing when I'm making it. So I'm going to compare it to this line down here, and I'm going to use my natural sense of whether this is level or not to help me see it. And if you draw lightly and you make a mistake, you can fix it. I'm going to draw pretty confidently though, because I feel confident. And that looks pretty good. So let's see here. Let's go around and just clean up anything that we have been leaving the stray marks behind. It's always helpful to clean the drawing as you go. It keeps smears off of it. And the smears and smudges from the graphite, or the pencil lead as you all call it, can really interfere. Wow, that was quick. It can really interfere with your ability to color the picture, because the graphite, the pencil lead, is very slippery material. And it interferes, it gets into the tooth of the paper, and it makes it very difficult to color it because it's slippery, and the colored pencils and the pigments or the paint or whatever you're putting onto this will not hold to it. It won't stick adequately. Alright, well, that has been a really good session. If you got this far today, you did a good job. My advice for you also is, let's put a little rectangle down here in the corner like this, And if you've got the line passing through it, just erase that part out and put your name down there. I'm going to put my name down here. This way, if there's more than one person doing this in your E-classroom, okay, then you will not get confused when it comes time to finish this project out in the not so distant future. So please put your name down there. All right, well, it's been a good session for the first day. I will talk with you tomorrow. Have a nice day.